Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. We're so glad you could be here. For the viewing audience who haven't had the opportunity to see your piece yet, please tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Our film is called Slow Dance. It's a short film, and it's basically about a breakup that happens, but we see it happen in reverse. And
with that, was it shot in reverse, or was it that you shot it and then it plays back in reverse?
We shot it forwards, and we also shot it in slow motion, so we did it in order. We shot it in order, like chronologically, but knowing that we would reverse it afterwards.
Fantastic. And I know in my research, Micah, for you, you're getting your foot in the door, and one of the things it said, of course, you have your quote when asked why you make films. You ask from Red Shoes, why do you breathe? Which I thought was a beautiful representation of how to do that. But
thank you.
My understanding is one of your goals is to expand your personal catalog to show what you're capable of. So this was done to be more of an art house art film piece. What did you want to make sure to convey to get your abilities in that genre out?
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's multiple reasons that you make a film, and I think that's more the idea of because I want to show that I can do this kind of movie and that kind of movie. That's one reason, but I don't think that's it. That's kind of more the career reason, and I don't think it's ever really like the main reason. But definitely, I always want to challenge myself, and this particular idea was something that I, definitely in hindsight, I don't think I knew that it was going to work, and I think trying to see if it would and trying our hardest, trying to see if you could kind of tell a story that was purely emotional rather than in any way plot driven. Things like that was definitely what I was interested in. But there wasn't like certainty going into it. It was kind of like, I think it'll work if we do it this way and that way, but let's find out. Let's try our best and let's explore and see what happens.
Was there one moment when it was like, oh yeah, this is really where we want it to? I mean, I understand not how you went into it, but when in the process did you finally go, yeah, this is going to be interesting?
I think the closest thing to that was when we were editing. The first thing that my editor did was like we never wanted to watch any footage forwards or in regular motion. So the first thing that she did was slow everything down and reverse it, so that when we were watching the dailies, we were watching slow motion reverse footage so we could see it. And there was one shot that is in the film that's a close-up on our actress Abby Hilden, and it's reversed, and the whole idea of the film is that we're going from the sort of the end of a breakup, the sort of nastiest moment, and seeing it go from being an out-and-out screaming match, seeing it go from that to being an aggressive argument, to being a regular argument, to being a passive-aggressive argument, to being, an aggressive conversation, to being a regular conversation, to being a sweet conversation. And there was one moment where you could see in the reverse slow-motion clip, you could see her expression go from really concerned and fearful, and then in an instant kind of go from that to being kind of joking and loving. And that was sort of like, that shot was like, oh, that's kind of the thing that the movie we were trying to go for, and then we, knowing that shot was in the movie, we tried to kind of reflect that in what the score does, the music at that point as well.
And please tell us about this music, because if my understanding is you are the composer, and you also play several instruments yourself, so please tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. So specifically for the score, it was a really interesting project because for this particular film, it's the only audio. of the whole piece. And so because it's the only audio, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility with something like that. Because you're complementing what's on the screen, and the emotional beats of the piece have to match what's going on the screen. So it was something that was different than what I've done before, where I'll have musical ideas that I'll use, and then that's more tacked onto the film. But this was something where I really had to think about what was going on visually and incorporate that into the score. So it was an interesting challenge, but a lot of it came down to just really making sure there was effective communication while we were doing it, and it was really, really wonderful once we got it right, because it was one of those things where there's so many different ideas you can have, and 99% of them don't work. And then just when you finally find that one that works, it's beautiful. And then, you kind of wonder, why you had any other ideas, because that just seems like that was the perfect one, So it was really great once we got it pinned down, and once that final score was there, it was as if it had been there forever.
So was the piece completed before you started composing, or had you already started on some of that before it was done?
No, so I mean, it was one of those things where, I had some ideas, but once we tried to work with it, a lot of those ideas I had before weren't really working with the film. So it was something where it was just trial and error. I had to sit at my keyboard with the film playing and just find something that, when it worked, it worked. And then once it worked, it was obvious that it worked.
And then for the score itself with the movie, did you play, or did you hire other people to play?
Yeah, so for the score, in terms of performing it, I reached out to a good friend of mine who I went to college with. We both did the jazz program together at our university. So he's a brilliant piano player, and I knew that he would have the right subtleties with the performance. So I reached out to him and hired him to come in and perform the score. And he just added such a beautiful, delicate touch to it. That was wonderful. His name's Blaise Martin, just a wonderful piano player.
It was haunting at moments.
I'm sure. It was just all around really beautiful.
And I mean the good kind of haunting, the one that women like to watch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
not spooky, scary.
No, yeah.
It's good, stays with you haunting.
It's a very emotionally powerful film, so hopefully we were able to bring more of that out with the score.
Excellent. Micah, how did you get into film? When did you realize this was your passion?
I never realized that I can remember. It was just always there. Like what I like to say is that after I got over wanting to be Batman when I grew up, the thing that I always said from age 4 was that I wanted to be a movie director. Which is kind of an annoying answer, because it's not really an interesting. This was the moment, But that's it's just always been there. Yeah, that's kind of where that Red Shoes quote. That's why when I heard that, when I saw that film, I thought, that's the most, because it's difficult to express, just how much, I'm always thinking about movies, and luckily there's a job that rewards that kind of obsession, and that's this job, so I'm grateful.
And is there a particular film, or is there a memory of seeing a particular film?
I think I've always been very obsessive about the art that I love, but the earliest case of that was Finding Nemo. And I actually look back on that film as an adult, and I'm still I even love it even more than I did when I was a kid, I think, because it's such a beautiful like, I think that movie did for like the ocean what 2001: A Space Odyssey did for space. Like when 2001 came out, we're like, well, not us personally, but people who saw that film were like, this is insane. How do you, that they use the power of cinema to like bring us places we never imagined we could go, and that's like what Finding Nemo did as well with the ocean. But just there's so many movies, but that's definitely the earliest one.
And is there a project you'd like to be part of to bring, maybe not the ocean, maybe not space? Is there something you want to bring to the world to get an interest, to get others involved, to get others to understand?
Well, I think that every time you make a movie, you're trying to get something that you feel deeply that maybe you haven't seen on screen before, this certain feeling, but that other people feel as well. So, like with this movie, it was this feeling of like true nostalgia. Like it was, this idea of really feeling, because nostalgia, we think of it now in a more corporate way, like, oh, the 50s were so great, but really nostalgia, the word comes from like mental health, and it's a symptom of depression, where it's about feeling so desperately that the time that has passed was so much better than the time that is now, and wishing that you could go back, and feeling like you blew it and lost something and let it slip by. And that's like there was the intense feeling that like this film came from. And the idea with this was trying to find a audio-visual way to express that feeling. So it's all about the way one filmmaker put it was, it's all about infecting other people with your illness, but I think that's what art is. It's having this, like, these feelings inside, and the way that artists, I think, kind of deal with that is by the way we get any kind of release from that is by trying to express it, and I think cinema is a way to do it. That you can really go straight to the soul. Cinema and music, I would say, are the two that kind of transcend other kinds of language. And if what we're always searching for is and striving towards is that feeling, that haunting feeling, that you really can't put into words, but you feel that,
Excellent. And Blaise, for you, are you, like I said, you play, it's piano and guitar and bass and ukulele. Are there any instruments you still want to learn and expand your talents with?
Yeah, so I'd really like to learn how to play the saxophone really well. Okay. So that's an instrument I love. I've dabbled in it a little bit. I haven't spent enough time to really learn it, but it's an instrument I'd really like to learn, just because I'm really into jazz. So it's a great instrument for that.
It is. And of course, I'm from Texas. I went to the University of North Texas.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
So
yeah.
Jazz band out there. Is working with movies something you want to continue to do with working with the score, evoking emotions through music?
Absolutely. So I've always been really into filmmaking and into films. And one of the things that really always got me when I was a kid, like when I knew I really liked a film, was when the music would be memorable, and I'd always correlate really liking movies with really liking the soundtracks, and music is just such a big part of film. And one of my favorite filmmakers said that film should be more like music than fiction, and that they flow in a similar way to music. And so the two for me go hand in hand. So I would very much love to continue doing this, and it's just really rewarding being on any part of a film, but especially being able to use my own creativity with music and being able to help a project succeed is really awesome. So I would love to keep doing it as long as I can.
And how did the two of you meet to be able to collaborate on this?
Yeah. So yeah, Micah and I were EPAs, which I don't know. Are they still calling it EPAs now?
We should say the whole thing, like.
Yeah.
Because I'm going environmental protection.
Yeah, sure, okay. Yeah. So at the time, it was the emerging programmer apprentices. I don't know if they call it something different now, but it's a thing that still exists. But basically, we were. It was a high school group, and we would help program the emerging filmmaker shorts block. That was the big point for it.
For Tallgrass, yeah.
For Tallgrass, for here, yeah. And so we I think we bonded because you had a taxi driver shirt on.
Yes.
And so
Are you talking to me?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so I broke the ice with talking about Scorsese. And then we worked on one of the Down to the Wire films together.
Yeah, the film race. Yeah.
Yeah, the film race. Yeah.
And what are your, you're wanting to do other shorts to make sure people can see what you are capable of and to expand your own limits and test them. Do you have future projects? Do you have a feature length coming out? What do you want to tell us about for your future?
Let's see. I mean, I'm in post on a film that's called Unmade. That's a short film. That's a really it's not a big story, but it was a pretty big production in terms of what I'm used to. So I'm really excited about taking that out on the festival run here in a few months. But yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of short scripts, and I have multiple feature scripts as well. But I think there's kind of an immature thing among young filmmakers that they really want to rush to that first feature, and I've definitely was like that for a long time, because it comes from like Orson Welles being like less than 25 when he made Citizen Kane. Steven Spielberg was 26 when he made Jaws, and you kind of hear that and you're like, well, what am I doing with my life if I'm not making Jaws, but that's all kind of rubbish, because really I've realized that when I do make a first feature, I want it to be like my best foot forward. And so I'm fine if I spend several years continuing to make shorts, making different various sizes and different genres, and learning. Every film you learn so much, and really, I'm sure I'm not the first filmmaker who said this, but definitely by the time you get to the end of a film, that's when you feel like, okay, I'm ready to make this film. And obviously, you just kind of try again on the next one, and taking the lessons you learned, but challenging yourself more. And then you learn some lessons the easy way, hopefully, and then you end up learning some lessons the hard way. But then you have those lessons and taking them to the next thing. And I know that I don't think I'm a good enough filmmaker right now to really handle or do a good job with a feature film. So I can recognize that, and just want to continue to make films, because that's really the best and really probably the only way to get better at filmmaking.
Is there somebody you'd really like to work with or learn from or take a master class from?
A lot of them are dead. So. Okay,
so let's put the parameters. If you could speak to anyone who's ever made a movie.
Well, I would speak to Martin Scorsese, who is still with us, thank God. But he's great. But I would, as far as anyone who's ever made a film, I'd probably talk to, besides Scorsese, I'd probably talk to either either this filmmaker Lynn Ramsey, who's also still making films. Her most famous film is We Need to Talk About Kevin. But she's, one of my 4 favorite filmmakers. And or I'd like to talk to this French filmmaker Robert Bresson, who was actually a pretty big influence on slow dance, but he made films from the 50s to the 80s, and the way he talks about film and art is so pure and beautiful, and I get a lot. But also David Lynch, and I would, if no one stopped me, I would just keep going for 50 hours. So I'll stop there.
No, it's a good variety. And then for you, is there a composer you'd want to have a master class with, or if 10-minute conversation across?
Yeah, there's so many to go through. I'd say definitely as far as film composers go, Bernard Herrmann is really the one that more than anybody has inspired me the most in terms of film composing. Largely just because how he would totally affect the emotions of a scene is just insane. So you'd have his very energetic and really suspenseful score, like in something like Psycho, and then you would have this kind of soft, somber jazz score that he had in Taxi Driver, and that stuff is just so masterful, and I love it. So if there was one composer that I would talk to, it'd probably be him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you ever had to have a song that this is the song that has to be on repeat, do you have a song?
Well, I guess it depends on the context, but if I wanted to drive my friend Micah nuts over here, I would play the Beach Boys' Kokomo over and over again and sing along until he combusted.
Should I tell you I was in grade school when that came out?
I'm a huge Beach Boys fan, so yeah.
No, I have memories of us in line in the cafeteria at school singing Kokomo, and I won't do it to you, but I do know the lyrics. I still have it memorized. And we were too young to even see the movie. So yeah. I do remember later when I did get to see the movie. But yeah, there's memories that tie to those things. It's not just the experience of the movie itself, but the experience of the moment when you went to the movie. Of course, that ties into all of that. So where did you shoot this piece? It appeared maybe it was an apartment?
Yep, it was actually the apartment where I currently reside with my partner, who was very patient throughout the whole thing. She also is the producer, the editor, and what's the third one? Producer, editor, and production designer, Julia Vargas, who's definitely the sort of MVP of this movie. But yeah, it was an apartment in LA, in Los Angeles. It was great because it's on the 6th floor, so you can't put any lights outside, obviously. So luckily, though, it was an overcast day, which for filmmakers is like somebody up there is looking out for us, because an overcast day basically means you really don't need to give a shit about you don't really need to care about where the sun is, for quite a few hours of the day. You can just kind of, it's like a clear, that's talking shop. So, but we were blessed with the weather, is what I'm saying.
And how did your fur babies, because if I'm correct in my cyber stalking, you have cats.
Yes.
How did they react to the filming going on?
Well, at the time we only had my son, Jello. That was before we got my daughter, Dolly Grip. But
nice name.
Thank you. But Jello was pretty popular on set. He was, the set cat, which isn't totally unheard of, but he kept people calm, and he at a certain point he was fine with whatever crazy things were going on in his domain. Actually, there's a great picture of him after the whole shoot was done. We still had all the equipment in there. There's a great picture of my cat just lounging on the dolly, on the hydraulic dolly that we had, just being on the seat of it. Great picture. Maybe I'll post it.
Yeah, and there are some people that said they will never work with children or pets because it was one of the best ways to drive yourself insane. Will you ever try to have a piece with your fur babies in it?
Probably not with my own fur babies, but yeah, I mean, the reason why people hate that is like the first reason why is because you have to hire an animal wrangler. Like legally, even if you're, at least in California, even if it's your pet, you have to hire an animal wrangler. And specialized jobs like animal wrangler, intimacy coordinator, stunt coordinator, fire marshal, things like that are for safety, they're necessary, which means people will charge a lot for them. So it's very expensive to begin with, and then you can have the greatest trained animal ever, but once the camera starts rolling, of course they're going to do the thing something other than what they were trained to do, so. But if the story demanded it, then I would definitely have an animal in my film.
And you bring up a good point. There's also the COVID compliance. So there's all of these. Did you have to do any of those with your piece? Did you have to bring any special in for any of those restrictions?
Luckily, it was around the time that some of those restrictions have lifted as far as mask mandates and even like testing mandates. For us, we just had like a vaccination mandate that you needed to be vaccinated in order to be on set, and then that masks were highly encouraged. I think most of us had masks on, but it was we didn't have a CCO because at that point it wasn't required. But
okay.
Yeah.
And for our home viewers, what are your social medias? How can they find you? How can they stalk you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Just that, it's pretty easy to find me. It's like Micah Street 11, I think, on Instagram. But you can just Google me. Apparently, it's easy to find stuff about me.